This is Pulse, episode number 17. On today's show, we take a deep dive into the latest apps survey results from Lightspeed Research. We do part 2 of 3 of our insane conversation with the global mobile ambassador, Tomi Ahonen. Plus, we make another stop on our Around the World in 80 Apps with Rudy Dawala of App Circus. Coming up right now. Peggy, welcome everybody. This is episode number 17 of Pulse.
Yeah.
God, I can't believe it. 17 episodes. Very good. My name is Rob Woodbridge. You know me from untether.tv. Just check it out. It is the place, the resource to find out what the pulse of the mobile world is doing. These guys are the guys who are inventing things that we don't even know that we need. Untether.tv. Almost 400 long-form interviews. Great insight from some of the best writers and best minds, I think, in the mobile industry. Including...
Now that's the way to get
including
to
you,
Rob.
Peggy.
That's awesome. Including me. Thank you, Rob. What a great intro.
Peggy Ann Saltz. Peggy, let's talk about Mobile Groove for a second before we get into this insane episode where we've got Tomi Ahonen, we've got Rudy, and we're taking a look at some more numbers from Lightspeed Research. But what about Mobile Groove? What are you up to? The writing machine.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I was thinking of calling myself tethered because that's what I am this summer. I'm tethered. This is tethered TV at my end. Okay, I'm not leaving this spot, but I'm doing some great projects. Writing a mobile marketing thought leadership resource, talking to the brands, agencies, finding out what they're really doing. Not what we think they're doing, but they're really doing is just fascinating. So. Never-ending supply of ideas. In fact, some that might even end up on our show because they're so interesting, like apps and advertising in the car, for example. It's really, really going to happen. I thought it was going to be the chapter that says, this is what's happening down the road. No, like now. So, yes, very interesting.
You know what? I think that's the big challenge here is that when you're writing a book, how many times do you have to go back and rewrite that chapter that you think, oh, it's coming in a little while, and it's actually implemented. You know, some of the announcements around WDDC, Worldwide Developer Conference from Apple, talking about disruptive technologies that will make you look back now and think, oh man, that page, that 2-page, that chapter that I just wrote, it's now null and void, or it has to change. It's crazy to be able to write a book as this industry is evolving. It's like building a foundation on lava.
Well, I have to say that as I move forward, because I'm a great admirer of how the long tail was built, just not published, but actually built online with everybody there. I'll be sharing it at Mobile Groove and sharing some interviews, sharing some insights, spreading it around, because my belief is always that, content is the more you share it, the more you have. And it should be an ongoing project. I mean, I don't plan to actually end when we publish. I think that it needs to continue because the voices, the people I'm talking with, they're not at the conferences. These are people doing their jobs. And now that I'm so fascinated by what they're doing, I didn't want to say it that way. You're having a conference. Didn't mean it that way, Rob. People who go to conferences don't have jobs, they're the unemployed.
That's right.
But they do have interesting insights to share, and they don't have the platform for it. So I'm going to provide that to them at Mobile Groove.
And it's so important because you're right. We've all been involved in startups where you put your head down for a year and you wake up and the landscape has changed so dramatically. So it's you've got to stay on top of these things, and that's why Mobile Groove is so important. And I think that's why untether.tv is important. Is that you got to know what's going on, and it's always great to know where you've come from as well, and documenting this. And I think that's what both of these sites are doing very effectively. And plus books, I think those are great ways to document things. They might be a little old school.
Yeah, but also when I think about your event, it's not to plug it. It's really just to commend you because I'm a great believer in innovation at the fringe. Everything is at the fringe. Everything is outside the center. So when everyone is focusing here, look there. And that's what your event is doing. I mean, it's bringing some people. I haven't heard of half of them. But when I read their bios and look at it, I say, wow, these people need to have a platform. So you're providing them one. And I'm going to have the pleasure, hopefully, of interviewing a couple of your speakers as well and turning it into some audio material over at Mobile Groove. So I have to say, your pick of speakers, Excellent. You're made for events, Rob.
Oh yes, well, this is. Thank you, Peggy. I keep saying this. I'm very excited. We're 2 weeks away from this as of the recording of this, and one of the things that I've found is that the exposure that I've had to some of the great people that I've interviewed for Untethered.tv have allowed me to be able to bring these guys together. Is that each one of these have had an episode on Untethered.tv, and I think that's really what it is. I believe very firmly that if you contribute to the conversation, that conversation just it reverberates. And what I look at this when I look at the lineup of the folks that are involved in this, including yourself, which I wish you were speaking at it, these guys are the ones who are contributing to the voice of mobile and this industry, and they're not letting it get overrun by snake oil salesmen like the web industry did in the early days. And there's an irrational exuberance right now, and I'm kind of mixed on this. The valuations are crazy, but I do believe that once you look at some of these people, there's a genuine interest in growing this industry. This isn't the bloodletting, or this isn't the greediness we saw in the late 90s and early 2000 around the web space and all those IPOs. So they're quality people, and that's what this industry brings. You walk into it, and it's like a warm embrace from the mobile industry. All right, well, those are the updates. We're not going to pitch anymore. MobileGroove.com, Untether.tv, and UntetherTalks.com. So this is, when we look at this, we've got some great research coming up in this episode. We've also got some great insight from Tomi Ahonen, who is incredibly insightful guy, and especially when he talks about what's going on in Nokia, what's going on in Microsoft, and what's going on in RIM, which is a good piece of this. Next week's episode, our final segment of Tomi Ahonen's interview, he will be talking about what he calls, his eighth mass media.
The eighth mass media. Which is also going to now be a part of my book because I found it so fascinating. AR comes of age and with a vengeance. This is not just catching the butterflies, which was very, very cool. Nothing against catching the butterflies or catching the Coke bottle tops either. But this goes one step further. It's going to be fascinating.
And that's next week on next week's episode, on the next episode on number 18. Mm-hmm. So be sure to check that out. But before we get there, before we get to episode 18. Well, let's finish off here. What we've got here is an incredible resource from Lightspeed Research that is focused on app use and smartphone use and how people buy, how people spend, what they buy, what they spend their money on in this app world in the UK. Why don't you give a little bit of background on what we're about to dive into, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen.
Okay. The reason this one is interesting, it's 1,000 people in the UK, but it gives you a good understanding, a good feel for how things are. Again, those welcome confirmations. I love it when you can actually find something, a data point or a study that actually supports what we think we know, because then we're confirmed. We do know it. There's a high probability that we're on the right track. And here, what I like is it's not your typical sort of report that says, yes, we're downloading apps and they're losing their novelty, et cetera, et cetera. This is saying we're downloading our apps. This is the number of apps we have on the phone, for example, to just put things in a perspective. Yes, I love the app economy, fully support it. It's happening. It's as important as the Industrial Revolution, but be realistic. Yes, some people do have up to 30 apps on their smartphone, but think about even form factors. It makes sense that we have 1 to 10 on our screen, 1 to 10 apps on our phone that we're using all the time. And if you just think about it and say, okay, social networking is what we do first and foremost, maybe that's 2 apps off of it. Take some sort of utility or some sort of weather or some sort of shopping. You see how much space is left for these apps that are sort of on the fringe, not the usual suspects. And you get an understanding of what our behavior is with these apps. It's not the app frenzy that people are talking about.
No, and I think that there are certainly things that what we saw some great trends in here, and one of the first things that I pulled out, obviously one of them is the number of apps on the smartphones because that's what everybody focuses on. It's we're kind of app crazy, but it's also I'll take it right back to the beginning of this. Is that they did a survey? What was the number of people that they actually asked? It was a survey, 2,485 people, right? And 52%. Okay. Had neither a smartphone nor a tablet. in the UK. And I think that that's one of the big stats here is that when you talk about growth, that's why they went out to almost 2,500 people, 1,000 people responded, but 52% came back and said, look, we're immediately disqualified because they don't have a smartphone or a tablet. So, you know, you were saying to Mary Meeker's point, North America different from the rest of the world different from the Far East and America. It's a people are evolving at different stages, and I think that that's one of the things that we have to do. But the number of apps, I think, is one of the most significant things here. But it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we're doing here. Number of apps, you know, what was that statistic? It's like over 80% have fewer than 30 apps, but the majority of them are 1 to 10.
Yeah.
So what else did you find that was interesting in this report?
Well, we do have our comfortable confirmation, again, is what I'll call it. What are we doing with them? You know, as I thought, it's games, it's social networking, it's weather, hey Canada, right? It's things we're doing on the fly that makes sense on our screen. And I think it's also the smartphone screen. I mean, it's larger than the one I had a couple years back when I had these, you know, remember the flip phones, there was nothing there, right? But I think you have to sort of, again, think about the context of usage. We're using the apps on the smartphone differently than we are on the tablet, which I'll get to in a couple of slides. So again, if you're an app developer, this is about talking about, you know, what works. They did look at health and fitness. It's 26% of the types of apps on the smartphone, which is interesting because remember a while back we did some millennial media report numbers that just showed this rise in fitness. And I'm wondering, 26% up from 0? That's probably not too bad. But it's giving you an idea of what we're doing when we're on the smartphone. And, you know, on the smartphone, it's all about me. It's my phone. It's all about me.
It is, and what's interesting about this is context. So I'd love to see a year-over-year report on this to show that kind of growth, because 26% in isolation doesn't mean a lot. And when I look at this, you know, games dominant at 74% of actual use, and social networking, obviously, as you said, and for us Canadians, weather. For we, the Canadians who are consumed by weather, we wake up and check the weather every day. 68% of types of I mean, these are the dominant apps: games, social networking, weather, navigation, which will change because of Apple's announcement with integrating maps into the their next iOS version.
Yeah.
So,
and you'll have to consider that I think the weather is also because it really is dismal in the UK at times. The number of days they have sun. But,
it's a Commonwealth thing, isn't it?
So,
yes.
And so what are we doing on the smartphone? How often? Again, that's the feel of how often we're interacting with these apps, which for me is not just saying we do a lot of social networking. Duh. I mean, yes, we do. But think about the interaction on the smartphone during that time with social networking, with news, with weather. For me, that spells out opportunity in the other direction. Again, going back to Mary Meeker, part of it's going to be about selling the apps. The other part's going to be about advertising on the apps. We're spending 73% of our time on social networking, 65% on news. 65% on news. That's a lot of eyeballs and, you know, eye time. It cries out for a business model that will monetize that.
Boy, does it ever! You know, one of the things that I look at this, and when you start to look at the frequency of the app use on these smartphones, is that this is a natural flow of how we use our desktops, really, quite frankly. But you know, daily use and weekly use is very important when you're trying to decide what apps and where to build. And you know, there are very few apps that receive daily use, and it's obvious. Like, you know, when we get into the actual top 3 apps, it's Facebook, it is Angry Birds. These are the only brands that they're naming at this point. But this is not a departure. This shouldn't be a shock for everybody that social networking, with the statistics, 500 million people using Facebook's mobile version, Twitter getting, you know, it's upwards of 60% of all tweets are now coming from a mobile device. That shouldn't surprise you. When you talk about news consumption and weather consumption, that shouldn't surprise you, and games shouldn't surprise you. And I think this is the thing that we've looked at. This is a disruptive, but we're just in that early stage right now where it's a migration from you know, a less comfortable, less fluent, tethered experience on the desktop, moving all that stuff over to the mobile space, especially the smartphone. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
No, they're just interesting
Yeah.
confirmations. What was a little bit surprising for me is when we get to is what you actually spend on your apps. That was pretty
Right.
surprising. But the mix of free and paid for apps on a smartphone, it's just interesting to see that because we hear about this all the time, that the iPhone is, an affluent, a premium audience. They will pay for their apps. They're accustomed to that. Android is different. Android is more popular. Android has a higher growth rate. But on the other hand, its users are not used to paying for their apps, and compared to the iPhone users, it's the graph speaks for itself, I think.
Yeah, when you talk about earning potential, free versus paid, yeah, I always wonder about this that iPhone users consume far more apps than Android users. It just seems that there's a strong majority of people that actually spend, they've downloaded many more. I'm just going to pull that up so that we have a reference here. Is that when you start to think about the number of apps on a smartphone, iPhone versus Android, the majority of them, it's crazy. It's like 30 people have 30 different, the majority of them sitting at 30 or below. Some people are downloading 50 or more apps in the iPhone and iOS ecosystem, and that's not the same when it comes to the Android world. And I think that I wonder because we're consuming so many apps, are we spending more time or less time in these apps? So people look at I've downloaded 50 apps, and this is because iOS ecosystem is so great, but is it too much clutter? And are people on Android, on the Android platform, actually using their apps more? Are they actually in the apps more often because they're only choosing 1 to 10 apps as the majority, or 1 to 20 apps as the majority? Or is it that just because the ecosystem is so splintered on Android that they don't have the super apps across all their phones because they don't own that, they don't control that ecosystem? So many different input mechanisms, so many different screen sizes that people are developing for. Is it limiting their growth? I wonder about this.
Yeah.
Are Android users fiercely loyal to their 10 apps, or is it just because they don't have the choice? And are iPhone users fleeting? Is it attention deficit disorder because there are so many apps? And is it hard, like 5,000 channels on your television set? By the time you've gone through once, the show that you were watching way back at the beginning of the hour is over. Is that what we're seeing in the iOS Android marketplace with smartphones? Who knows? But I think it's a very interesting conversation. I don't know that the number of apps is as important as the quality of time with those apps.
And you bring up the point of quality. I mean, maybe I have to rethink. I'm one who dislikes. It's just not in my DNA to agree to control freak quality control, i.e., as what we're seeing in Apple. I was always thinking, I know developers as friends and colleagues, they're having a hard time getting their apps approved, but maybe it is that terrible, difficult approval process, quality control, that makes certain that the apps there are different from the apps in the Android offer, and that makes a big difference. And maybe that's why there's such a difference in downloading them and using them. We don't know, but it's something to consider. And I think that this report is interesting because it brings that to light.
What is it ever? And it's a small segment, but I think this is indicative of a bigger picture. Certainly when I look at my installation, I have a far greater number of applications on my iPhone than I do on my iPad. I use them differently, but they're all different from my Android device as well. So it's this is an interesting conversation. I think that we're just at the beginning of. All right, the other side of this is the tablet side, and there's such a difference between earning potential and number of apps downloaded and the amount spent on these apps. Let's talk about that to wrap this up.
Okay, well, first of all, tablet owners, they are to some extent, here in Europe, maybe not in North America, but here in Europe, still early adopters. These are people who are, sold on the technology. They want to get the most out of the technology. They want to use the technology. So it's not so much maybe all about me, but all about what I want to do. And you see that here, where tablet owners, 57% have 1 to 20 apps on their tablet. Over 1 in 10, that's 9%, have more than 50 apps. So you've got this early adopter that's going wild, probably because there's also more screen space. You have 10 apps on your phone, that pretty much fills it. You can have quite a few on your tablet screen. And we're just seeing more, the number of apps on the tablet is greater, but what we're doing with our tablets, I think, is what's fascinating.
Yeah.
You want me to skip to
Well, I
that?
think that that's a really important piece, is that a lot of experimentation, because it is a multimedia consumption tool, and as well for some, it's a creation tool. So you would expect this to kind of we're in that experimentation with the tablet side. But I mean, let me ask you this: you're in Germany. When you look around, do you see a lot of tablet use? We were talking before we went live. The Kindle Fire is not available
Not
there.
yet.
The mass distribution. Do you see a lot of it there?
Not yet. I mean, it's amazing here because I need to have an Apple set up for my more creative work. Okay, so I need to go out and I need to go over to the other side after years of PC, and here it's really Apple is a status symbol. It's, you stand in line at the store. There are only only certain stores that have it. I mean, I'm not in Berlin. I'm in Cologne, so it's a different type of setup, different city, different demographics. But it's people who have one. They're showing off. I see them in the cafes. It's like they pull it out. They couldn't be louder about it. Pull it out of their backpack and clap it open. It's like, yes, it's my iPad. Do you want to see it? I paid for this with money that you don't have, or whatever. But it's more of a status thing here, is what I'm seeing. I mean, not among business users. That's something very different. But the type of sort of the laid back sort of average person hanging out in the Wi-Fi cafe, just sort of using it because it's part of their lives. It's already integrated into their daily routine. It's still more of a hey, look at me thing here. But maybe that's what needs to be to catch on. Different cultures have different things. It'll be the keep up with the Joneses thing here. Keep up with the Schmidts. I don't know.
Nice.
I'll leave it at that. We'll see what happens when we finally get some of the devices over here that we need. As you mentioned, Kindle, we're still waiting. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a North America is a good test bed for this, for rest of world. So everybody, look at what's going on in North America and the battle of the tablets, and select the best and use those. And it's not unheard of. I was sitting in a Starbucks yesterday, and I look around, and it is every single person seems to have an iPad. It is not a status symbol. And there's that one guy over there with a playbook, and another guy over here with an Android tablet. But for the most part, it is, and maybe it's just the culture of Starbucks, but it is the dominant tablet, and it's you see them everywhere. And I think that's one of the things that is interesting. Is that you kind of pull this back now to the pervasive nature of these devices, and how much people can earn from these things. So that's how much have people spent on the tablets on apps in the last 6 months is a staggering statistic. I love these stats.
I just wanted to also point to what people were doing on their tablets.
Yeah,
That's where I saw some opportunity. Before we get to that, just very briefly, what I thought was interesting is no, it's not about social networking. I'm doing that on my smartphone. See, I'm multitasking and doing multi-device. Interesting is business and finance. That could be because it's early adopters. It's a little bit of a male thing. But nonetheless, finance, banking, business, that spells for me opportunity. One, all the banks I'm interviewing for my book love their iPad apps. I mean, that's where they're going because they know that's a sit-back thing. I'm going to look for a mortgage. I'm not going to do that on a smartphone, but I will hang out on the couch and do it with my tablet. And another thing to think of is, again, that eyeball time. You're an app developer. You have people's attention for business and finance banking apps, and if you're thinking about monetization, again, if I'm spending that much time on a daily basis with your app, then monetize that. So it's saying, again, potentially an opportunity for mobile advertising as well.
It's not to be forgotten, and we quickly dismiss that. But those types of apps that people are using on the tablet, I think that there's great overlap, but there is an experience that is lacking on the smartphone. Just simply the size of the screen, and the ability to use these things as a sit back experience. Throughout this entire report, they're talking about the impact on television and the distracted nature of a tablet. Are you focusing less on what you're doing, like watching TV? when you have a tablet around you? And the answer is yes. People are now multitasking, and this is a different change. This is a change in human behavior when it comes to the way that we used to just sit back and, my father always used to call it the idiot box. And now, when you're bored, when you lose your attention, you can actually jump over to do things, and the tablet is a completely different experience. But I love this. I would pull this up. Is that weather again? Type of apps on tablet. Weather. Like it's just we're consumed by weather and news and social networking. So, but now it's about revenue, isn't it, Peggy? Like it has to be about revenue.
Absolutely. It has to. And there you see that we're spending more on our apps on tablets already. iPad owners most likely to have spent more than £30 on apps in the past 6 months. We don't see the rate of growth, and I'm hoping that Lightspeed, and I've heard from Ralph Risk over there that they're going to be doing this again, but to look at that growth, we are paying. This is revenue. This is monetization of mobile connected. And we see that tablet owners have spent more on apps. They're willing to spend more on apps, and probably that's going to continue.
Yeah, I would say that. And I think that the difference between smartphones and the tablets are very interesting. The average, the majority of people would spend between 50 pence and £3 on a smartphone application. And you just saw that statistic where what we're talking about here is over the last 6 months, the average amount spent, the majority sure is less than £30 in the last 6 months. But you see that long tail down the road is that, there are very few people. I think there's 9% of respondents said that they would spend more than £5 for an iPhone app. But if you look at this statistic, more than 20% of iPad users and 15% of other tablet users are going to spend more than £30 in the last 6 months on iPad or tablet apps. And I think we're starting to see that price on an incline, which is great, because what we've seen on the smartphones is a quick race to zero when it comes to monetization directly from licensing, so selling one app at a time. And I like to see that kind of. I'm glad we may have hit that rock bottom and are starting to scale up when it comes to the ability to generate revenue just strictly from software sales. Maybe that's an old school model, but people are still spending money on these things.
It's going to be interesting to see, however, if we see some sort of exodus of, a brain flow over to tablets where developers say, look, I tried it in smartphone, it just isn't working, whatever the fragmentation in Android, we could have a show just about that. Skip it, go to iPad, go to tablet. It's where the audience is. It's an affluent audience. It's used to paying money for high quality apps. It's also very creative, is what I've heard people say. Some app developers say it's just cooler, bigger screen. It just looks better. It'll be interesting to do that going forward, Rob, as we explore this in our series.
Well, this is a glimpse into the usage and the usage patterns, the purchase patterns and the usage patterns of these two very important platforms, smartphones and tablets. And what we're seeing is the maturation of the smartphone market and how people are using that, and it's very specific what they use it for, but they use it on a daily basis. And we're also seeing that the early trends when it comes to the tablet side. And that's why these reports are so important to digest, to understand a little bit, and make sure that what we've got here is a deeper understanding where you can make money as a developer. How are you targeting your audience based on this knowledge? It is going to help you. Like, for example, if you are looking to build an app that you want to sell to people that are over 50 years old, don't. They have the smallest percentage they're the smallest percentage of people that will spend money on applications. They look for free apps. But then is there a way to target those guys with an advertising model and give it away for free, some value? Those are the decisions that you can make based on this data. And it I always look at this kind of data as maybe this is 6 months old, but it's a leading trend. It's a leading indicator for you. That hasn't changed. This data hasn't changed much. But it's always good to get perspective year over year. So this is fascinating stuff. I love these statistics. If you'd like some more information, go to lightspeedresearch.com, where you're going to find great insight, great blogs. Certainly the release of this report, and I love this kind of data. So we'll be bringing you more and more of this as we go through. Right, Peggy?
Absolutely. I'm a numbers nut. You know it. I data points. That's my life. And And of course, that's why we also, I think, purposely chose to team up then with Tomi for the other side of it, because his perspective on, what kind of platform war is this is just also extremely important to understand, because developers have a lot of choices. That's what comes across here.
And without further ado, we're going to go right over to Tomi, and he's going to enlighten us, as he always does. This is about a 20-minute segment, and Tomi is going to dive into the plight of Nokia, the plight of Microsoft, and the plight of RIM. And it's so fascinating to listen to Tomi speak about anything, particularly something that he's so passionate about. So here's Tomi Ahonen, the soothsayer, the global mobile ambassador.
Just one quick point, Tomi, because you brought it up. And it sort of surprised many, and I'm doing research into it because people are saying, you mentioned Amazon, people going on Amazon to buy Lumia phones, but Amazon within the race, within this multi-horse race that we're talking about, it would just be really interesting to hear from you, because that's not just Amazon as another flavor of Android, but it's also a device that we don't have it in Europe, but we certainly saw it literally go on fire in the States.
Yeah, I think that Amazon is one of those that it has been very careful on its migration to mobile. They have seen a very good, lucrative digital opportunity, obviously becoming the biggest Western world, reseller on retail store on online, challenged by a couple of Chinese ones. That's what I mean in Western world, but in total number of sales. But they've been slow to come to mobile, and they've come more on the tablet side. I think that there's a natural migration for Amazon sooner or later to make a bigger entry into mobile because of their strategy on the cloud. So that they're actually one of the largest, if not the largest, cloud services provider on the infrastructure platform side, Amazon. So as a white label platform for other companies to use cloud services, very often they're using actually Amazon services. So that they're a very big player on the cloud side, and everyone who talks cloud will automatically include, oh, by the way, cloud services will be mostly delivered through mobile. So I think that it is a natural place where Amazon will sooner or later appear into the smartphone, mobile, pocket space anyway, but they're coming slowly, moving through the tablet side first.
All right, I've got to bring this back to Canada because as we know that RIM's recent announcements, they've been moving towards this, maybe a little bit slow. It's kind of like we're watching RIM neck deep in mud trying to run. It's very difficult to watch. It's very painful to watch as a Canadian. But what is it? What can they do? Is what they're doing with BB10 their future? They've talked about retrenching back into the enterprise space and really focusing on the enterprise space because really that's where their bread and butter was, and they turned their eye away from it. But do you think that you said earlier that this is, even if they fail miserably, they're a 5% company, which is still a good amount of phones distributed. This is a profitable company. People forget that. It's not going anywhere. But what's on the upside? And then how do developers embrace this platform, or is there an opportunity to embrace it?
Yeah, I think that this was one where RIM took a strategic view on what their opportunities were. They, by accident, captured very many early markets in especially the emerging world, but also in several European countries, Britain, for example. They captured the youth market. So they became the popular smartphone of choice for the youth because of BlackBerry Messenger. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate side effect of this was that they had rapid growth outside of the United States and outside of the enterprise market in the consumer space, where all the heavy growth was in smartphones for the last 4 years. They were riding that wave on a wave that was going to end. The youth market is only a small sector of the whole consumer space. The moment they got saturated with BlackBerries, they had no need to grow more BlackBerries. And unfortunately, with BlackBerry Messenger works very well with a 5-year-old BlackBerry. So there was no reason to upgrade the phone. The BlackBerry was rarely the most sexy, coolest, greatest phone on other features, except for the best keyboard and best messaging. Therefore, most young people, older teenagers will have 2 phones. They would keep the old BlackBerry and they would keep upgrading the other phone if that was the iPhone or if that was the Galaxy or that was the Sony Xperia or whatever their other phone was, they would keep replacing that one and hold on to the old BlackBerry. With this, RIM was stuck with that churn problem that they would keep on reporting disappointing consumer success, that their consumer markets were not growing anywhere near at the same rate as the industry. And now I think that it is a reasonable argument to think that perhaps we should not focus on that area. They're not going to be the cheapest manufacturer to be able to go for the mass market that is now appearing in the world. Perhaps go into a couple of niche areas and especially guard their home, the enterprise space. That in that sense, I think that is good. The one unfortunate sidestep they did was the tablet adventure. So just when Android came on fire and the consumer space truly exploded and mobile and smartphones were growing 70%, 60% the last 2 years, then RIM took their eye off the ball, launched a tablet which was not the perfect tablet anyway, but nonetheless, now they put most of their sales effort, most of their marketing effort, their branding effort to try to enter a new, different kind of market dominated by Apple, where they went head to head against Apple. The BlackBerry was not going head to head against the iPhone. So they went against the most powerful potential rival. And at the same time, because RIM itself was struggling with profitability, they started to fire staff, especially sales staff and marketing staff, which would have been needed to capture that enterprise and the consumer space. So I think that was a misadventure. Quite funny, at the moment, Nokia is committed to learning from that mistake and repeating that mistake. Because right now, I mean, honestly, today Nokia has its stockholders annual meeting, and just before this meeting, Jorma Ollila, the outgoing chairman, former CEO, who built Nokia's mobile phone business, this is in his last day, he's just leaving today as chairman of the company, he gave press interviews where he promised Nokia will be releasing tablets.
Oh, no.
Which is, again, I think the dumbest possible thing you could do if the company is unprofitable today. Then Nokia should first secure to make sure that it returns its handset business to health before attempting to conquer a completely different business where it goes head to head against Apple, where it has no brand strength, where the retail channel is completely different, the sales method is completely different, where the pricing is completely different. It's tablets are not mostly subsidized; they're PCs. You will sell them in PC stores, and most handsets are subsidized, and especially smartphones in the most advanced markets and so forth. So I think that Nokia is now repeating the RIM mistake in this tablet space.
I mean, one of the things that I truly believe is that you're right. RIM focused their entire efforts. Like they turned the CEOs, the co-CEOs, the engineering team turned their entire focus on the playbook, and during a 12-month span did not release a smartphone, did not release a new piece of technology, and then they came out with a crippled device. And maybe the playbook eventually gets to the point where it's a competitive device that people want to use or is an effective tool. But this is purely speculation, but do you think that this precipitous slide happens if they look away from the tablet and focus on at least releasing a couple of new phones during that year that they focused on the playbook? Do you think that we would still be having this conversation about RIM's decline today if they had just focused on their devices?
I think that there's very, very good evidence to show that the world is not one size fits all. Nokia used to have a large portfolio of smartphones. They released more than 50 smartphones per year, more than one per week around the planet. Not in every country, but around the planet, they released more than one new smartphone every week. That was at the time when Nokia had 1/3 of the planet's market share. They lost it, and they've been pruning their portfolio. Meanwhile, who's been expanding their portfolio? Samsung. Samsung said earlier this year they're releasing 20 new smartphones for the India market alone. That's almost 2 per month, just for the India market. So I mean that they are filling in that gap which Nokia stepped out of. And they are almost perfectly executing the strategy that brought Nokia to success. And I think that in this sense, definitely, BlackBerry made a very big mistake not releasing a new phone. They were releasing at the rate of about 4 new phones per year before this gap. And that was definitely a contributing factor to the rapid decline that they saw in their market share. The global handset replacement cycle for all phones is 14 months, 14 months. For smartphones, it's 13 months. In advanced markets, it's 11 months. So that's not every person, it's not the average person, but it's the average replacement cycle. Some very geeky people will have a new phone every quarter and will just go and get the latest phone. Oh, now I need to have the iPhone 4S. Oh, now I need to have the Galaxy, S3. Now I need to have the PureView, whatever is the latest, Samsung, BlackBerry Bold, and every week need to show, oh yes, I have the coolest phone. Because some people replace very, very high pace, it means the average number mathematically becomes lower. But the median person, the average person on the planet, tends to replace their smartphone less than once every 2 years, on about approximately once every year and a half, every 18 months. The employed person in the industrialized world, Western world, will have two phones. So if we replace both of those phones every 18 months, it means that we have a new phone in our pocket every 9 months on average. And BlackBerry cannot afford to leave a year gap in this space.
I'm just curious, when you're talking about this, Tomi, if we look at it from a higher level, how much innovation do we really need in mobile? Because I remember the discussion about Apple and saying that it's brilliant to move in the direction of incremental innovation. It's perfectly fine to just have a little and then a little bit more and a little bit more, rather than trying to be a breakthrough product. And that's what you seem to be saying here too, is get those phones out there, have no gap in the product cycle, but don't try to be path breaking in the process. Is that what I'm hearing here?
It's the difference between a niche player and a mass market player. I think this is the same if we look at cars. You look at Porsche and you look at Toyota. So Porsche cannot hope to be profitable Porsche competing with Toyota and building taxis and building vans and building electric cars and building family cars and hatchbacks. No, that will not be Porsche anymore. It will not be cool. It will not be sexy. It will not be desirable. It will not be the sports car. But if Porsche truly understands its soul and keeps constantly making just the most super desirable sporty cars, whether it's a 2-seat car, whether it's a 4-seat car, whether it's an SUV, but it's always Porsche. It recognizes its place. Then that's perfect for a niche player who can be highly profitable. On the other hand, if you're a mass market player, if you're Toyota, you have to constantly compete in every market against Ford, against Volkswagen, against General Motors, etc. So in that case, you cannot afford to let the diesel market go, or afford to get the family market go, or afford to get any one, vans, minivans, whatever becomes popular in cars. You have to play in that space. And in that sense, I think Samsung understands this very, very well. Nokia used to understand this very well. So that it's one that they just want to make sure they flood the market with every single conceivable form factor variation that has a reasonable chance of success. Then when they have a hit product, they rush that production into every market. The Galaxy, excellent. We will keep on making more of those. Meanwhile, they experiment. Maybe people like Pico projectors, so we try that. Maybe we want super cameras, so we try that. Maybe we want separate keyboards, we try that. Maybe we want the super large screens. They try that. And then they keep on experimenting to make sure they don't miss out on any one market niche.
I was going to say that because, that's just the point, is this experimentation. And what's happening is we're having, devices like the Galaxy Note, which is an entirely different product category. We have the Kindle, we have the iPad, we have lots going on there. So let's talk about the fragmentation there. We've been talking about how to choose a platform, but maybe the real headache for developers is how to think about your apps across all those screens.
That's also something that for the app developer specifically, or service developer in mobile, fragmentation is not going to go away. Learn to live with it. It's not going to go away. There is not going to be a couple of standard form factors and a couple of standard screen sizes and pixel densities and network performance issues and camera capabilities and so forth. It will just get worse. This is a headache you need to learn to live with. But on the other hand, you need to be very intelligent about it. So that means that doing some basic research to see which platforms which are the popular form factors that are relevant to your experience of your service. I think very, very telling was Rovio, the company which makes Angry Birds, so the most popular game on the planet. Angry Birds, Rovio from Finland. They announced when they saw Windows Phone 7.5, they said, the numbers are not there. We're not going to bother to release Angry Birds for Windows Phone. Microsoft got very angry. Nokia got very angry. They said, please, please, please release it. Rovio said, the numbers are not there. Microsoft came over and handed cash to Rovio. Please, we cannot afford to be without Windows Phone. I mean, without Angry Birds. So after that, Rovio CEO said, fine, okay, we will develop an Angry Birds for you. But counting the platforms and their form factors and the installed base, certain kind of platforms will, or their form factors will reach the penetration that makes it worthwhile, but you cannot possibly do 500 variations of your app. That'd be crazy. Very soon, if that becomes the need, then focus, pick some areas, or do it on the mobile web. You do it on HTML, etc. Do as much as possible on platforms. Do it on MMS if you can. I mean, do it on platforms which are standardized. Whereas the devices, they will just look at Nokia with the PureView 808, 41 megapixel camera density. Is that just, I mean, that's not the end. So if this is Nokia now in 2012, imagine what Nokia will be like in 2014, or whoever does the most amazing camera at that time. So this race, this fragmentation will not end. This is the most innovative, exciting time in digital ever. So we will get more variety, we will get more differences. And for the developer, that means headache in terms of managing the fragmentation. But that should not be the end. I mean, that just make sure that you cover reasonably large chunks of the platforms. If they can cover 10%, if they can cover 5%, even if they can cover 2 or 3% of the total landscape, that's, we're looking now at tens of millions of potential users. Those are worthwhile. But if it's a very tiny segment which can only cover 500,000 people on the planet, don't bother.
mPulse is going around the world in 80 apps with our ongoing new feature with App Circus. We are doing this just to show you guys the truly global nature of the app economy. We have Rudy Duela, who is the co-founder of App Circus, to join us today to talk about his pick of the week. Rudy, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Rob. Yeah, thanks for inviting me back on the show.
Well, let's jump into it. Who is your pick this week?
This week I picked out Bear Care, who won the App Circus in Vilnius in Lithuania. And it's an augmented reality game that works on iPads at the moment. I think they also develop now for Android and other devices. And it's basically a little bear that children can actually feed. They have to protect from monsters that will attack them. And it's a very cute game, actually.
It's also interesting that it was not just a winner in App Circus, but it was also the hands-down winner at Mobile Premier Awards, which I'd like you to maybe tell me a little bit first maybe about the awards for people who don't know it or haven't judged it as I have in the past, Rudy, what it is, and why do you think it was such a runaway winner, a success there at your event?
Yes, exactly. Well, the App Circus, we do all these events around the world, and then all the winners, or the 20 best winners of all these App Circuses, they are selected and pitched in the Mobile Premier Awards during Mobile World Congress. So that has a really good jury. Yeah? So we have some of the best people in mobile there. We have Russell Buckley in there. We have Peter Westerbacke in there from Angry Birds Rovio Mobile. James Pierce in there from Facebook. Diane Azer for Waze. People from SoundCloud and other companies. So I think they choose this app as the winning app because it's really well executed. The graphics are great, and actually, when you hold out the game with your iPad, it's actually mixed with real life elements. So your background is actually it's your home, yeah, or it's the children's environment. So you can actually put the bear into a real environment. And then I think the next element is that. It has a lot of things of this Tamagotchi game from the 90s. I don't know if you remember this very popular game where actually you had to feed your Tamagotchi to keep it happy. And well, they have actually integrated a lot of these elements too. So they can do different things with the bear. They can change its color. They can feed him, and then they have to protect it, of course, from monsters that try to attack it. Yeah. So I think it's a really cute game for children. And I'm not really sure what happened to them afterwards. I think it's too early to tell that, but for sure they're going to get a lot of demands actually from the industry, yeah, to do something with this game or maybe other games that they will develop. Yeah, it has a lot of potential.
Thanks, Rudy. We will see you and everyone else who's watching at our next stop as we go around the world in 80 apps.
See you next week.